A settlement agreement is a legally binding document that acts as a waiver of claims and is given to employees by employers where they want to negotiate a termination of the employee's employment. Most commonly, they can be used when employment isn't ending, but that's not the main use of them. And basically, they under a settlement agreement, what will normally happen is an employer will pay a sum of money to an employee to compensate them for losing their employment and giving up certain employment law rights that they might otherwise have. So in order to be legally binding, a settlement agreement must be in writing. It must say certain things and you must have independent legal advice. So what you'll find is if your employer has offered you a settlement agreement, you'll need to take independent legal advice from someone who is authorised and able to give you the advice, and most commonly that's a solicitor or a chartered legal executive. There are some other people who can give advice, but yeah, they've got to be legally qualified essentially in most cases, and they have to be regulated, have indemnity insurance and have a practicing certificate to prove that they're able to give that advice. So in 99.9% of cases, an employer will pay for an employee to go and take legal advice because it's in the employer's interest to ensure that the employee has taken independent legal advice, to make sure it's binding, because obviously one of the requirements of a binding settlement agreement is that they've taken independent and legal advice. So your employer will normally tell you what their contribution to legal fees will be when they put the offer to you as an individual. So common things are thinking about whether you're being paid properly in terms of your notice and holiday pay, maybe the provision of a reference, sometimes trying to agree the terms of an announcement that might go out internally or externally about why you're leaving the business. The other thing to look for is maybe other benefits that you might also be entitled to, and making sure that they're incorporated into the agreement. But ultimately, what we'd be looking for is the sum of money you're receiving, and advising you around kind of what might be claims that you're giving up in return for that sum of money and the other benefits that you're receiving. So again, in 99.9% of cases, there will be a specific clause in a settlement agreement that talks about confidentiality about the agreement itself, and they can range from not talking about the agreement to not talking about what's in the agreement, right through to not talking about anything at all to do with any of the discussions that have happened to offer you the agreement or negotiate the agreement. So you need to be mindful when you're talking to your employer about a settlement agreement that may be something that's going to be in the agreement. There might also be a clause regarding confidentiality generally about your employer's information that might have already been in your contract of employment, but that might also be repeated in the settlement agreement when you receive a copy of it.